Welcome to Sustainable Stock, Reviving Legacy Genetics, the podcast that delves into the power of traditional cattle genetics and the ranchers bringing them back. We're returning to the tried and true practices that prioritize what truly works on the ranch. Each episode, we'll talk to ranchers who are rediscovering the methods that built strong, resilient, efficient, and fertile herds in the 1960s and 70s. These breeders are blending the best of the past with practical solutions for today's ranching world. Whether you're passionate about the future of ranching or curious about heritage genetics, this podcast is for you. Presented by Boss Sires. Tune in as we reconnect with the roots of the herd. Here's your host, Patrick Powers.
Hi, and welcome back to Sustainable Stock. Today we're joined by Steve Campbell, a lifelong cattleman and well-known cattle coach. Steve helps producers improve everything from soil and forage to cattle selection and herd health, always with the goal of building better beef and stronger operations. We're excited to dig into his insights and learn what it really takes to raise cattle that last. Mr. Steve, are you with me?
I am, Patrick. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking some time out of your very busy schedule to speak with me and fill me and the listeners in on what it is you do for a living. You've got a pretty neat job from what I've been able to dig up on it.
Well, there are a lot of different paths, I guess, led to what I do now. But probably 1989, I started reading the Stock and Grass Farmer. And in the mid-90s, there were some articles in there by Gerald Fry. Not that were the only ones, but he kind of intrigued me on the cattle selection side. And Gerald and a number of other mentors and old books and hours and hours and hours of observation and being at different locations, I guess. Being at different locations. Every zip code is different. The general shape of a cow works everywhere, but she's a little different in volume.
Yes, sir.
Whether it's up north where you got to retain heat, you need more of an O up front. Where you get down south, you need a narrower front end so you can retain or you dissipate heat. But there's still this wedge-shaped cow. I call it the solo cup cow. You lay it on its side. The small end is the front shoulders and the head's out that way, and everything's getting bigger, taller as you go back, deeper as you go back, wider as you go back. And if you just flip the cup over, that's your bull. Everything gets taller, deeper, and wider as you go forward.
Yes, sir. Well, before we get too far into the cattle, I kind of would like to take a moment and ask who you are as an individual and what makes you tick.
Oh, probably 35, 40 years ago, my sister said, the thing you enjoy most in life is learning something new. And that has certainly been true. And I'm kind of a detail guy. So when I get into a certain area, I try to know everything I can about it. What works, what doesn't. You hear what these people are saying, those people, what you're observing yourself. I'm 71. I started consulting about cattle probably 14 years ago. Yeah, I think it was 14 years ago. For money. And before that, I was just trying to help people out. But
it was passion for long enough. You decided to try and make a living with it, huh?
Yeah, I had broke my ankle really bad the end of January 1999, and it was a horse accident, and I was in one of these external fixators for 6.5 months until my lower leg healed, and the doctors are like, you're going to have to get a desk job, you won't be able to walk around. And I was beginning to believe them. And you probably know where you were when the Twin Towers fell. Well,
absolutely.
Do you know where you were at 10:30 in the morning on December 12th, 2002. I went in to see a different kind of a doctor. He was a chiropractor, a certified applied kinesiologist, but where he really helped me was he was an expert in nutrition. And he said, stop eating this inflammatory food, start eating this non-inflammatory food. And in a matter of 10 days, this pain I just could never get rid of in my ankle started going away. And that got me digging into, well, what is good food? How do you make good food? How do you make individual kinds of good food? Well, you need the biology in the soil to have, the healthy plants and all of that. So a number of parallel train tracks led me to kind of to where I'm at today. I get up in the morning. I want human beings to get healthy, and my best way to do that is help people with better soil, better plants, and then typically with what I do, forage for livestock.
Yes, sir. Well, you spoke on the influence of Gerald Fry in your work, and I was wondering if you could go a little further on that. That's not a name I'm very familiar with.
Oh, golly. Gerald started consulting in the mid 90s, I think. I've got to back up another 20 some years.
Funny how those stories get away from you, isn't it?
Yeah. So in the early 70s, Carney Redmond heard Burl Winchester give a talk. And in there, Burl, who had been teaching at Montana State until they kicked him out because he wouldn't stop telling the truth. Anyway, Burl was talking about linear measuring sheep. And Carney went up and said, hey, can we adapt these measures for cattle? Oh, I'm sure we can. Well, Carney's grandson, Ken Redmond, was driving Carney around, and they would, and maybe Burl, but they would meet and they would go measure cattle. And Ken was kind of the math whiz, and he figured out how all of these different measurements told you whether this cow could or couldn't have a calf, could or couldn't maintain herself and her calves, could eat enough for three, stuff like that.
Yes, sir.
And you could use the measures different ways. If you want to win the show ring, you could measure for animals that would win the show ring. If you wanted animals that performed well on grass, you're going to have quite a bit different looking animal than would win the show ring, but you can definitely do that as well.
Well, like you noted that early on in this podcast.
Well, I'm here. 10 years ago, 4 out of 5 people that called me about consulting wanted to know how to make grass finished beef better.
Yes, sir.
I did that for 20 years. I quit 5 years ago. Well, currently, 4 out of 5 people that call are commercial cattlemen that want a cow that's more fertile and costs less to run. Michael McDonald, another linear measurement gentleman that I got to know, he said, if you're just selling calves off the ranch, 40% of the profit is fertility, 30% is keeping costs of the cow, 20% growth, 10% carcass treats. My mom and dad got married in 1950, and Dad told my mom, he said, whatever you do, Joanne, when you get to Patrick's place, don't ask him how many cows he's got. That's like asking how much money do you have in the bank, Patrick?
I just learned that.
Count his bulls and multiply times 50, and you'll be real close on the number of cows that he owns. Well, like this Boss Sires and what some other people are doing, trying to get that fertility back, they're finding that if they put what industry says they should have for bulls, 1 to 20 or 1 to 25, they wind up with injured bulls because there's too much bull power out there. Kind of a squirrel here. I went down to Oh man, Bastrop, Texas, with some people from Idaho. We were looking at Akaushi bulls. That's red Japanese cattle. Wagyu, black Japanese cattle.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, we found two really good bulls, two pretty good bulls, a good bull, and they kind of got the sixth one free. They hauled them back to Chalice, Idaho, bred cows. 9 months later, they've got calves. 11 months after that, they DNA, because if they're half Akaushi, they got a 25 cent a pound premium on that calf. This heart brand would buy them back. Well, they found out one of those bulls bred 107 cows, another one bred 73, and another one bred 59 after they'd hauled them from down by Austin, Texas to the cold mountains of Idaho.
Yeah, one put in the work.
Well, three of them bred more cows than most bulls you find in other breeds.
Yes, sir.
But as people start getting these back to nature, more fertile bulls, you don't need to buy as many bulls, or you'll wind up with hurt bulls.
Yes, sir. Could you give me that percentage breakdown again? Your colleague or friend made that statement.
Yeah.
Could you give me that one more time?
Michael McDonald, and 40% of the profit off of the ranch, or for the ranch, if you're just selling calves, is fertility. Cows having a calf every year and for more years in a row.
So if it's weighted that heavy, why have we seen such a fertility crisis within cattle?
The taller an animal is, and it is a great question. The taller an animal is in any breed, the fewer sex hormones. So when we did the space race, we went from frame 4.5 to 7, stretched out that broccoli rubber band. Well, we gave up fertility for growth.
So you're saying our chase of larger cattle may have affected it?
No, I'm telling you, it did affect it.
Oh, okay.
It isn't that they can't breed, but sorry, I'm going down a different rabbit hole. But there was quite a drought. There was quite a drought in the western states. Let me make sure I come back to this where we were just at.
I apologize.
Talking about now. No, that's fine. But half the cattle went to town 5-6 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And if people were honest and they knew the average frame score of the cows they had before the drought and what the average frame score that they had 3 years later, the ones that didn't breed, the ones that couldn't eat enough for 3, the ones that got skinny, they went to town. I would bet money that the average frame score was at least 1 lower than what they had before the drought. Well, anyway, back to sex hormones shut off long bone growth. In the front of the cow, estrogen shuts it off first. So the more fertile cow is going to look like she's walking downhill on level ground. Testosterone shuts off sex hormones in the back end of the bull first. The more fertile bull will look like he's walking uphill on level ground. Sex hormones shut off long bone growth. You want growth? You're giving up fertility. You want 20% of the profit from growth? You're giving up 40% of the profit from fertility. What do I mean by that? If the average age of your cows is, I don't know, pick a number, 6, you're probably keeping half your heifers every year. You're keeping 25 heifers out of 100, so you'd have enough replacements because your cattle aren't breeding back and whatnot. Well, if you had more fertile cows and the average age of your herd was 7.5, now you're keeping 10 or 12 heifers. You've got more calves to sell every year, yes.
Yeah, that translates to profit immediately.
Well, they're smaller, but the less they weigh, the more they bring per pound, and you had more to sell. But that's just, you're beating your head against the wall trying to convince somebody that reads the slick trade magazines or what the university's telling.
So how do we go about shifting this, sir? If you've been around enough and you spoke to enough that seem to have their eyes open to this vision, how do we bring this conversation to the remainder of the market?
The remainder of the market. Up to this point, it's just been people that, for one reason or another, you get enough pain and you want to change.
Yes, sir.
A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So unless somebody wants to change, unless they're motivated to change, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. And, hey, everybody's pretty happy with cattle prices right now. But when the market does its thing, which it always does,
yes, sir,
there's going to be maybe some more people that want to change. If you only had to buy 60% as many bulls, what would that save you? If I don't, maybe we'd ought to go on to something else. I get bogged down into things like that.
You're good. Well, you've brought up a lot of the frame score and everything, and I kind of have a greater question of what do these numbers reveal? Do they show who's more efficient in this type of management system? Could you walk me through that?
More efficient in this type of management system. Johann Zeitzman wrote a book, Man, Cattle, and VELD, which is grass. He's from Africa.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, what he wants for a bull that'll create daughters that'll do well on grass, he wants a bull that looks like 8 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound sugar sack on only forage. So Bim the Michelin Man. Kind of back to this bull, you've got two solo cups, one turned to the right and one to the left. The one where the big end is the bull, everything is getting bigger as you go forward.
Yes, sir.
Another one of those guys that I learned a great deal from, but it took me 18 months because I was so entrenched in my thought process. Back to how do we get these other people to change their ideas? It took me 18 months before I finally understood what Gene Meitler was telling me about the rib angle on the cow. And you wanted that rib angled, all of them, but looking at the last one, you wanted it angled somewhere between the hock and the ankle. And I'm like, well, how do we get that? Oh, a vertical rib in the bull. And then we kept talking about the cow and the rib angle back and rump slope and some other things. And then it took 5 years to realize that vertical rib in the bull affected so many things in the bull. You can have the right rib angle in a cow and have a number of other things wrong. Rarely do you find a bull that has a vertical rib that you don't have the bull you're looking for. If that last rib is just pointing right down into prepuce, that's great. What does that do? Well, with the rib straight up and down, you now have a larger heart girth. Michael McDonald, Ken Redman, and others linear measured 20,000 head through a feedlot in Nebraska in the early 90s. And found that for each inch, the heart girth was a bigger number each inch than the top line, the pin bone that's back by the tail to the pole. For each inch it was larger, it was 37 more pounds of gain, and they ate 37 fewer pounds of grain to do it. So they got bigger, they ate less, and they were out of the feedlot quicker. Well, that vertical rib shoves the front legs apart. At a year of age, for each inch, the bull's shoulders are wider than the length of the rump, the pin to the front of the hook bone. And again, at 1 year of age, for each inch, the bull's shoulders are wider than the length of the rump. It's 2.5 days less gestation. That's about a 5-pound lighter calf. So you've got a bull that's plus 2 or 3. The calf comes out 10 or 15 pounds light. Definition of a Cavingese bull is low birth weight. And then he grows like gangbusters. That top of the shoulders, it shoves, you've got the width between the front legs with the toes, the split in the toes straight forward. What you really want is slightly pigeon-toed. That's a really masculine bull, but it shoves the top of the shoulder blades apart, changing the steak to hamburger ratio. Why does it do that? With the shoulder blades wider, you have a bigger ribeye muscle. You don't lose any hamburger, you gain ribeye steak. So a vertical rib does all those things.
Well, I know that Mr. Meitler was heavily influenced by Bondsma, and I believe you are as well, correct?
Yes.
Well, what do you feel that he obviously lived at a different time with the relationship with cattle. How much do you think has carried forward into our world? I may have phrased that poorly.
No, you didn't phrase it poorly. There were some things. It would be nice to know everything that he knew. What he could go and just show off, at a rodeo or something, just run cattle through, or a sale barn or something. But this is actually a good question. I go and do a 1-day field day or a 2-day school, and I mean, there's just a gob of information, and people go home and they start looking at the adrenal hair whorl on the bulls and the cows. Well, that's a good thing to look at, but it's like number 8 on the list of important things to look at, Yeah. And so what was most important to Bondsma? The most important thing was glandular function. He wanted the cow that shed the earliest. He knew way more than you and I could ever talk about if we had 12 hours. He said, if I could only use one thing to select which animal that I wanted to eat for the year, it would be the one that shed its hair coat the earliest in the spring, because that would be the animal with the healthiest gland system, and that would be the healthiest meat for me to eat.
Do you think there's anything further to be said of that? Do you think that our relationship with food has shifted because we're not keeping healthy stock? And
100%. 100%. Yes.
So us not valuing hormonal function and these other attributes within cattle and us manipulating them has led them away from health and them being a healthy staple of our diet.
I'm
not trying to trip you up. I'm just trying
to
have a conversation.
No. I'm just trying to figure out what to say. So Weston A. Price, he was a dentist at the turn of the last century, and he was seeing so much facial deformity and cavities. He thought it must be in something in the environment, something we're eating. So he went around the world, found 14 groups of people still eating in the old way, nothing modern, Western processed. There was no rhyme or reason the amount of fat, protein, carbohydrate. Minimum fat was 30%. Eskimos, 80%. They were all in perfect health. The common denominator in the 30s was all 14 of those groups were getting 5 to 10 times the vitamins and minerals the average American was getting in the 30s. We don't get half, maybe even a third of that today, because we have turned our soil into dirt. If you haven't read the book Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown, it's a good one to read. If you don't feed the biology in the soil, you will be working for your dirt your whole life. If you feed the biology in your soil first, your soil will work for you for your whole life.
Dirt to Soil.
Yeah.
All right. It's now on my read list.
Okay.
Well, all right, sir. Well, to shift the conversation a little bit, where do you feel that some of the issues that beef is currently facing, how are they being masked? How, if we were to achieve one goal with this podcast and peel back that curtain a little bit for people to see where beef is currently falling short and explore these other alternatives, how would we go about that? What would that message be today, sir?
Well, that is a good question. The beef today on average, is not as nutritious as it was 50 or 100 years ago. We've got too many of the neighbors' toxins blowing onto our land, and we've mined the minerals out. And you can go buy better genetics, but if you don't nourish them, they won't express themselves on your place. Depending on where you're at, on 2 bricks grass all the way up to 20 bricks grass, the lower the bricks and the more toxins, the more supplements you're going to have to add to the animals' environment to get them to perform. But the better you do at developing forages, the diversity, the ground cover, the regrowth, we're supposed to rest the soil every 7 years. In my mind, that is to replenish the biology. There are a number of great podcasters on the soil thing, but until you have improved your soil enough, you're going to need something to help the animals along. Detox. We've introduced 50 million unique substances in the last 75 years. Not all of them are our friends.
Yeah. What would you say to those saying that they're resting the soil with a heavy grain-based diet for their cattle, that they're taking that load away from the land and sustaining cattle with inputs? Would you say that that's an active reprieve for the land, or would you say that we're just furthering the problems?
No. Gabe Brown, about 400 acres of his place right next to Bismarck, he could not put cattle on, and he could not improve that soil near as fast as where he could have living root as long as possible, armor on the soil, diversity of species, and minimal soil disturbance until he could add livestock. It was an order of magnitude faster improvement of the soil. But to say, we're going to put them in a feedlot and feed them grain. Well, we're going to plant grain in, shall we say, Iowa. What made that soil so deep? Ruminant animals grazing it down to dirt, basically, and then leaving it for a year or two before they came back. That's what created that really, really deep soil. So if you want to take all the cattle away, if we could stop the chemicals, you'd still deplete all of that, all the minerals in there. I was talking about Western Price earlier. When white man moves in, you can get 80 to 100 average crops or 40 to 50 good crops before the minerals are played out. But once the minerals are played out, then that corn, typically hybrid, now GMO, the minerals aren't there, and the bugs show up because they're out there eating what's not fit for man or beast. So we kill off the bugs. When you've got above 12 bricks grass or corn or soybeans or whatever, there is way less bug pressure. Bugs, being Mother Nature's cleaning crew, they know to stay away from the healthy plants. They don't have the same thing as our liver, so that high mineral, high sugar content in those plants would turn to alcohol in their system. They can't get rid of it. They would die. They stay away from the healthy plants. Well, there are very few healthy plants until you get into regenerative agriculture.
All right. Well, sir, you've used the term a couple times. I was wondering if you could define bricks. What does that mean for the uneducated listener like myself?
So you get what they call a refractometer, and squeeze a drop of a tomato, a carrot, cucumber, a grape. I mean, you hear about them use them in the winery all the time, so they know when to pick the grapes to make different varieties of wine. But the more minerals there are in that plant, the higher the sugar content. Well, the more minerals there are in that plant, when you get that drop on the refractometer and lay it down and look up towards the light, it reflects the light. And very few minerals, you're going to be 2 or 3 bricks. It just barely bent the light. The more of a bend it makes, the higher the number goes up. Rarely do you see 20 bricks grass.
Okay, well, I'm glad I asked you to define that, because everybody can grasp that we're living in a world that's nutrient deficient. I mean, I keep hearing about that more and more, that our food is not at the same level of nutrient it was previously.
And how do you get clean minerals? You know, the Vikings have been throwing everything, and everybody since have been throwing stuff over in the ocean. So the ocean's not as clean as it was. But sea salt. Maynard Murray wrote a book, Sea Energy Agriculture. And he was seeing his elderly patients who'd predominantly been eating ocean-based protein have fewer aches, pains, diseases than those that had been eating land-based protein. So he started bringing seawater and sea solids back to the land in Nebraska. And over the course of 20 years, he was able to recreate the immunity to disease he found in the ocean in both plants and animals. He could feed pigs ocean-grown grain for 2 weeks. They'd quit rooting. Then he'd go back to just conventional grain. They'd start rooting again. 2 weeks on ocean-grown grain, they'd stop rooting. Knowing that our blood and ocean water are the same 92 minerals in the exact same balance. I think it's iron and magnesium are reversed. He took a dog, took out 90% of the blood, put in ocean water, and the dog lived.
Oh, wow.
So making a mineral water every other day in 1 tank, or every day with 2 tanks, that's the closest thing to our blood that, or the cattle's blood that you could do, other than foliar applying 5 pounds of sea salt per acre every 40 to 50 days during the growing season. Those minerals attached to a carbon atom through a plant are 90% bioavailable. In the mineral water, they're 50+% bioavailable, but in the dry farm, they're only 20% bioavailable.
Yes, sir.
There is a 2-minute long YouTube that I did on making mineral water. It's a YouTube mineral water, Steve Campbell. It's 2 minutes long. Okay. I wish I had used the words out of balance instead of the word imbalanced, because imbalance sounds too much like imbalance. And we had to do a little math. But if you want to know about mineral water, that YouTube's a good thing to do. And I was very specific about where to place it and how to jerk it out of there.
Yeah.
Trying to leave the least amount of cloud.
Well, if you'd like, sir, we'll attach that in the show notes for today.
Okay.
Well, to shift our conversation a little more general, we've spoke on how unique your job is and where it applies and where you come in and offer your consulting. But where do you find the largest commonality and where these people have gone, where producers have gone astray now? Is it in their cattle selection? Is it in their relationship with their land? A little bit of both? Is it the fact that they don't recognize the cow as a tool of the land?
Well, That's a good question. I'm trying to think of how to answer it. I mean, some stories come to mind here, but um, when I was a kid, the really good farmers grew the seed, and then they sold that to the regular farmers who grew potatoes or wheat or sugar beets or. And when I was a kid, there's a book, I don't know if you can get your hands on it, called The Battle of Bull Runts, Runts. And it was about dwarfism in Herefords. And L.P. McCann, the author. And it was a bull that was born in 1889 or 91 is where it all started. But these, in the 60s, the seed stock, the cattlemen, not cowboys, the cattlemen, they were growing the bulls. Well, just, this is going to get me in trouble, just like what happened with seeds, it got to be a moneyed game, and not necessarily the best cattlemen, stockmen were growing the seed stock and selling bulls and cows, heifers, to cowboys to use. And we got to have a pedigree. And oh my gosh, I got to think about who sent this to me. There was a quote, to the memory of Thomas Bates of Kirk Levington, 1775 to 1849, who understood the ways of cattle and how they may serve mankind, whose integrity, utility, insight, and then to me the most important, and superb contempt for pedigree without performance. And so we've got all these pedigrees and this and that and whatnot. And if you're not looking to see if that's actually a fertile cow, I'll go someplace to look for cattle and they'll hand me all the paper and I'll kind of fold them in half and stick them in my back pocket and go make my selections and then pull them out and say, well, tell me what I did. And I was sorry, I don't mean this to sound bad, but I was at a guy's place one day and a fellow I knew wanted 10 heifers. So I went in there and I walked around for a couple hours and I picked out 15 and we got them down to the corral, and 4 of them, no, one was too good. I bought him myself or her. And then I asked him, I said, well, tell me about the mothers of these heifers. And he started talking, well, this one and this one. And he got to the third one, he got done and he looked and he goes, you just picked the heifers out of my very best cows. Well, I didn't know. I was just looking for the things you were supposed to look for fertile, easy-keeping heifers, or fertile, masculine, fertile bulls. That sort of thing. And so that solo cup, if people can just, you can go on the website and there's tailormadecattle.com. There's there's more than a dozen recordings of different things, but the solo cup cow, that you've got 2 of them opposite directions in front of you. The one with the big end of one of them is the bull, and the big end of the other one is the cow. That's kind of a shape you're looking for. And the fewer acres it takes to run a cow, the further off the ground the bottom is. The more acres it takes to run that cow, the closer to the ground the bottom is. But you get them too deep, you get the ribs too vertical in the cow, they'll get too fat to rebreed. A guy in about an hour east of Springfield, Missouri, did everything exactly wrong. There's 4 or 5 different things, and he did all of them exactly how he was told for about 15 years. And he had the most infertile herd of cattle I've ever seen. More than half of them would not breed back to have their second calf. Almost all of them would breed to have their first. They were too fat to breed. All the bad stuff, pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, toxins, and hormones have an affinity for the fat. that cow gets too fat and it's time to send progesterone back there to keep the corpus luteum going, it gets gobbled up in her own fat before it gets there, and she just cycles again and again and again.
Yes, sir. I like that quote, especially the portion pedigree over performance. It lets you know where we started to have a mindset shift.
Yeah, 60% of science is observation. I was up in Canada a couple of years ago, and we questioned, and somebody said, "Well, what about all this new technology? Can we use it to help us?" And I said, "Well, if the only thing you're going to look at is numbers, owning cattle, you will fail. If you're not going to look at the animals, you will fail."
Well said,
Uh,
sir.
well, it we've gotten a long ways from from fertile cows, and these cows, that early glandular function. Fred Provenza wrote a book, Nourishment, absolutely fantastic book. Home field advantage. That calf, unless you take her to a higher plane of nutrition, they're never going to perform as well as what mom was eating while they were in utero, or what they were eating at mom's side. So there's a home field advantage there.
Applying that logic, you would want a cow to lay down you want to establish your bloodline in a cow that could do it with as little input as possible. Because
100%.
the goal is to constantly be improving. So if you can use your cattle to improve your soil health and your forage capability, then you should do nothing but reward those genetics time and time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
I can follow that logic, sir. I don't know. I think you have to choose not to at some point.
Well, maybe I don't understand what you just said. You have to choose not to at some point. Is that what you're saying? That's how we got away from?
I'm saying that we valued incorrect things and we didn't take that for what it was. And we let people establish value in numbers and ribbons. And we quit valuing a cow's relationship and its ability to calf. So if you don't value that, why would you value the remainder?
Exactly.
It was a flippant statement, but I said what I said. Do you have a direction you'd like to take this, sir? Is there something that we haven't spoke on yet that you would really feel amiss if it didn't come up?
Well, when I get to somebody's herd, the cow that gets my attention first is the shiny one. Why is she, or those 5 out of 100, why are they shedding early, shiny, getting along fine, and the other 95 aren't? Or 95 are, and hey, why are these 5 not? Let's just get rid of the 5 that aren't. If you've got 100 and only 5 are performing, there's probably a toxin involved here. Somebody asked me, well, what toxins? We don't spray. March 11th, 2011, there was a tsunami in Japan. Nuclear reactor at Fukushima failed. First lap of that cesium cloud across the U.S. was in a line from Boise to Philadelphia. Human miscarriages doubled the year following that Fukushima reactor. That's a half of a world away.
Oh, wow.
How many people just across the road, the county, the state, the country aren't doing things that are helping you? So one of these detox clays, the 2 best ones that I know of, no, not best ones, the two that you can find the easiest, probably Redmond Conditioner out of Utah, and Desert Dynamin, Jerry Bernetti, kind of on the border between Nebraska, Nevada, and California. Jerry's dead now. God bless his soul. What a wealth of knowledge gone. But unless you want to buy some kind of an enticer, I'm not pushing grains here, but ground barley, wheat, corn, peas, lentils, sunflower meal, something like that. Unless you want to buy one of those and mix it into one of these detox clays, don't buy them. The cattle won't eat them. But if you can get them to eat them pretty quick, you don't have to put near as much enticer in there. A fellow in Fallon, Nevada, had high arsenic in the water and in the soil, and he had tried every mineral virtually known to man. He had to get the cattle in 6 times a year, run every single one through the squeeze chute, do a liquid mineral drench down their throat. Or he said, if I waited 65 days, I could see it start to turn downhill. Well, that's kind of the half life. It takes 120 days to change out all the red blood cells, which you don't want to bring a bull home 60 days before you want to use him, because he'll be at the low point in semen quality and production because he's getting adapted to the new environment. Turn him out the day or two after you bring him home. Same thing with heifers. Bring them home 4 months early, or start breeding them just as soon as you get them home. But anyway, so I said, well, I think the conditioner would work for your cows, but you're going to need a lot of enticer. Go 50-50. Well, he called in a couple of days. They won't eat it. I said, go to 3/4. He called in a couple of days. Well, they're eating it now. He called me in 2 weeks. He says, I'm now putting the conditioner out without any enticer, and they're still eating a half a pound a day. Those cows finally found something that would put out the fire in their belly, arsenic in this case, and they were very willing to eat that bitter conditioner because it was way better than the alternative, the fire in their belly from the arsenic.
I don't like how Tums taste, but I'm here to tell you it beats laying in bed and all night miserable with acid reflux.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Well, sir, you spoke on quite a few points of rediscovered old wisdom. I was wondering if there's any more. How do you see yourself as a part of the lineage of wisdom that's been laid down with cattle?
Oh my gosh, I'm standing on the shoulders of a bunch of giants. I mean, some of this stuff, a little, I have figured out on my own. I connected dots differently maybe than somebody else. I just read about a whole lot of different dots and in a bunch of different fields of study. And, there are things in jet airplanes that probably relate to beef cattle. How do you use that thing over here differently? Inductive thinking, from the particular to the general, the inventors. I found 1,000 ways to not make a light bulb. From the particular to the general, inductive thinking. Deductive thinking, from the general to the particular. But yeah, and so maybe I'm a bit of an inductive thinker, looking at all these different dots, and I've been told, this works this way, this way, this way. Like I said, it took me 18 months to give up that, or to finally understand that angle back rib on the cow. And you can get that angle back rib on the cow somewhere between the hock and the ankle. You don't want it pointing out in front, or she might get, if you've got real easy grazing, too fat where you live. But she can have a lot of other things wrong with her with that, even if she has that angle rib. But rarely do you find a bull that's wrong in a bunch of places. If you've got a vertical rib, he'll have that rump slope from the hooks up level with the backbone, and then 3 or 4 inches of slope down to the pins. A small diameter tail, a pointed pole, a lot of vertical folds. All of those things denote butterfat. Butterfat, easy keeping cows.
Yes, sir. Well, you spoke earlier about how when you go to assess these cattle, when people call you and ask for help, you arrive, they hand you the paperwork, and it hits the back pocket. And we go and evaluate these cattle, and you spend a moment with them, and you find the value in the cow itself. And we've also spoken on the struggle with fertility within the marketplace. How do you feel an organization like Boss Hires enables producers in this world?
Well, Grant has done a good job of finding that bull that's fertile in a number of different breeds and in a number of different zip codes. Let's just put it that way. Um, and right after, sorry, this is a convoluted answer. Right after World War II, there was a deal in Germany where every mating had to go through, I can't even remember, the Bessemer something or other, a VG, VB, can't remember, but the livestock were so decimated, it was so important not to make one false move. We didn't want anybody just putting any bull with any cow or horses or chickens or whatever. And it was crazy how quickly they turned around the cattle industry by making sure that they only used the best of the best of the best sires, whether it was for horses or sheep or cows or pigs or whatever. And they got their livestock industry back in a hurry. I think there is an article about that on bovineengineering.com. That's Gerald Fry's old website. His son Doug has still got that going. I think there's an article still on that website. But you just don't run across really good bulls all that often. 1 in 10,000 are going to be a real game changer for people. 1 in 10,000 on the grass finish side. I don't have a problem saying that. If you want gourmet beef and high meat to bone ratio, you've got an 800-pound carcass that cuts out 60% meat, 480 pounds of meat. You got a 70% or 700-pound carcass that cuts out 70%, and I exceeded 75 quite a few times. You got 490 pounds of meat to sell. It took a whole lot less feeding time to get to a 700-pound carcass than an 800-pound carcass. Well, if land is scarce, if resources are scarce, efficient animals should be the thing we would naturally want to get. Well, efficiency in the feedlot eating grain that has to be hybridized because the minerals are played out of the soil. And so we need something that can grow on land that has no minerals versus heritage corn has to have a lot of minerals. Purebred livestock have to have a lot of minerals. Crossbred livestock, the meat gets tougher when you do it, but they don't require as many minerals, typically live on average a year longer, give you one more calf.
Well, I feel like we've empowered the producer in our ability to, it feels like a cheat sheet rather than having to jump around and dig and consult with people like you and find these diamonds in the rough herds here and there and then still pick among those. We've made it where it's all in a central place, and we found producers that care, and you can actively speak with them and hear the passion and the knowledge that drives their herds.
I like to call that kind of breeding years of thoughtful breeding. It's not inbreeding, line breeding, whatever. Years of thoughtful breeding. I mean, and you were using your eye. You weren't just using the numbers.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, you spoke on that, and that inspired me on a little quote I snagged from you from another podcast I've heard you on. And it was, whenever it's successful, it's called line breeding. When it's unsuccessful, it's called inbreeding.
I did not make that up. There's probably been 5,000 people have said it. I don't know when it originated, but it's if you go out and find the bull that looks exactly like what I should say, and like Gene Meitner said, any one cow can make a liar out of you. Well, the bulls could too. Jimmy's got 500 purebred cows, and once every 10 years, he gets a bull that looks exactly like that. Well, how up and down are his cows, and the bell curve of offspring are not going to be anywhere near as tall and narrow as somebody that's been doing years of thoughtful breeding, getting rid of the bad stuff, making sure he's doing the right stuff. When you buy that bull that you made him to 50 cows and you get 25 heifers and 22 of them, 23 of them are really good, and you breed them right back to their daddy, and again you got 85-90% are really good, you found the right bull. If you went and you found this bull that the stars aligned on so and so's place, and you bred 50 head, and the bell curve is wide, and maybe 30% of the heifers were something you would want to retain as a replacement, that's not the bull you want. You want the bull that's really going to give you more of what you should be looking for in a cow, which would be early shedding, walking downhill on level ground, a big enough guts to eat for 3, a wide enough butt to get the calf out, rump slope, and then the butterfat indicators, which would be a bald udder, small diameter tail, pointed poll, small cannon bones, a lot of vertical folds.
So you're not fearful of line breeding at all?
Most people could go to 3/4. And if you bred to that bull and the majority of the heifers are good, I do it again. If the heifers are all over the place, don't do it again. I guess that would be the way to, but I wouldn't go past 3/4 for most people.
Yeah.
96, 7, 8% of the people out there should not try to line breed.
What would you say leads you in that statement? Is it the individual's inability to properly appraise the value of different qualities of their cow and what will be the potential to be expressed?
Well, what do they say? It takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in any field of study. If you're going to line breed, one thing about it is you get to do your own thinking. The problem with that is you have to do your own thinking. If you don't do your homework, it's going to be inbreeding and you're not going to like the result. If you're going to do your homework, it could be wildly successful. But most people don't want to put in the time to do the homework. And Gene Meitler, God rest his soul, he was a man out there on a hill all by himself for years and years and years. It was till late in his career before he really got the notoriety that he deserved for trying to follow Bondsma all those years.
Yeah. Well, I just recently had the honor of going and meeting both of his sons and sitting down with them and having a good conversation with them. And I truly believe they're carrying on their father's work and the best of their ability. Well, sir, if there's nothing else you'd like to add, I have my main closing question that I ask every visitor to the show. Are you ready for it?
We'll see if I can answer.
All right. So, Mr. Campbell, in your view, what is the moral obligation of the cattleman to the land, the cattle, and future generations?
Well, we need to leave the earth better than we found it. So I get up in the morning, I want human beings to get healthy. So if I don't have animals that, one, they want to eat again, they're tender, but flavorful, well, to get that flavorful, I've got to get the neighbor's toxins out and more minerals in. Well, a wider diversity of plants and higher bricks is going to do that. But to do that, I've got to have minerals in the soil. But the minerals can't get into the plant without the biology in the soil breaking down the minerals and attaching them to a carbon atom through the plant. So I went backwards. It all starts in the soil. The more biology you've got, the more chance of getting the minerals in the plants. The faster the cattle are going to gain, you're going to kill them, the more tender the meat's going to be, the more nutrient rich and clean. And one little tiny story, a lady at the farmer's market, one day I said, if I forced you to choose between dirty omega-3s and clean omega-6s, which would you choose? And she says, well, I'd have to choose the clean omega-6s. The toxins, count toxins, not calories. Count chemicals, not calories.
Well, sir, you've got some very powerful perspectives, and I like that you are not a man of ego. You're more than willing to state that you're just the dot connector. And I've thoroughly enjoyed rambling on with you. I hope you've enjoyed your time spent with me. Thank you again for coming on and sharing your experiences with myself and the listeners. And for all the listeners out there, if y'all would like to dive further into Steve Campbell's work, his website, along with a couple other things we've talked about throughout this episode, will be found in the show notes. Steve, thank you for coming on again, sir.
Well, Patrick, thank you for the time, and I appreciated your questions. I got a little ramped up a couple of times there, but hopefully the information will help somebody and their family thrive on their land, and that's what it's all about for me at this point in my life.
Yes, sir. Well, to the listener, don't forget to ranch with purpose and
breed for the future.
Thank you for tuning in to Sustainable Stock, Reviving Legacy Genetics. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share. Join us next time as we continue exploring the legacy and future of cattle ranching. For more information, visit us at bosssires.com. That's BOSSIRES.com. Or connect with us on Facebook. Until then, stay rooted in common sense and connected to the herd.